Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was sent in World of Equestria by Kaguya, and Naruto got harem with pony girls, part 1. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Moretsuna Sora. Link is in the description. Also subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let's start the story. Kurama furrowed his brow in frustration, as this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Naruto and the Uchiha had finally sealed up Kaguya in another Chibaku Tensei. But then things went south, as she, in one last bit of revenge before being fully sealed away, dragged both Naruto and Sasuke into the pitch-black void that not only knocked them out instantly, but was seemingly tearing up Naruto's body. I'm not going to let you die like this, kid. I don't care if I erase this half of myself. I am not about to let you die after everything you have done for us. Kurama roared, as he pushed his energy through Naruto to heal up the wounds almost as quickly as they popped up. Kurama, let us help you, Matatabi said, as she and the other Bijuu couldn't stand by and watch the boy who had helped free them, befriended them, and fought for them suffer like this. Then find a way out of here. The sooner he is out, the sooner he is safe. After you set us on a path, I want you all to let yourselves be pulled back to your other halves, Kurama said, as the other Bijuu widened their eyes at him. You aren't coming with us? Son Goku asked while Kurama shook his head. I'm staying with the kid until I know he is safe. Even if there is only a tiny bit of myself still alive when this is over. I will let my last bit go back the second I see him leave this place still intact, Kurama said in a tone that the others knew there was no use trying to talk him out of it. You heard our brother. Now find a way out. I doubt we'll get him back to his original world, but anywhere is better than this. Do it fast, as at the rate Naruto is being torn apart, Kurama won't be able to last much longer, Yuki said, as the others pooled their energies and started to search and make Naruto drift through the completely black void. Kurama could feel his consciousness fading, as his chakra was getting much too low, but he continued to heal Naruto before he noticed a rip open up in front of the path they had Naruto drifting towards. We found somewhere, brother. We don't know where it goes, but it's somewhere out of here, Gyuki said, as the others looked towards Kurama, worried, as the fox's body started to get dangerously skinny at the low amount of chakra he had left. Thank you, now, Kurama said, as Gyuki put his hand on Kurama's shoulder before the fox shoved him away. I said leave. I have to make sure he gets through safely, and I don't want you all being stuck. I'm fine with fading, but I don't want you all to go down with me, Kurama said, as Koko tried to speak up for Gyuki to send her a let him be look that only made her and the others frown more. We will see you again, brother, but not this half of you. We will still miss you nonetheless, and we will make sure father saves the others from the illusion, Gyuki said, as each of the Bijuu patted Kurama on his back, lending him the little bits of chakra they could offer while still keeping enough to protect them on the way back. Keep the kid safe. He's done a lot for us. I hope wherever this takes him he is happy. He deserves it, Son Goku said, as the others nodded, and one by one they faded away, leaving Kurama to be the last one in Naruto's seal. Kurama let out a low chuckle, as Naruto drifted closer to the rift. Thank you for everything you've done for us, kid, since because of you we are free. You fulfilled your promise. I'm just sorry you couldn't live peacefully in your world. Hopefully this one is good for you, Kurama said, as he braced himself before pouring, in one full burst, all of his, and the bits of his siblings' chakra into every bit of Naruto to the cellular level to keep him safe as he entered the rip. Stay safe, Kurama muttered, as he faded from the seal just as the rip closed behind Naruto. Naruto, as he fell from the sky, was surrounded by a golden sphere of energy before he landed in a dense forest with a loud crash that the dome took the force of to keep him safe. The forest almost seemed to move towards him, as various trees around the dome shifted and melded together with roots that burst out from the ground below it until a massive tree stood up taller than any other tree and cocooned the dome inside it. Canterlot. When she first woke up this morning, Celestia, the princess of Equestria, thought it was going to be another normal and boring day of royal duties, and for the most part it did until she felt something powerful break into the world in the direction of Ponyville. Princess, princess, a familiar voice yelled, as a purple unicorn burst into the hallway before she noticed her there and ran towards her. Did you feel that just now? She asked, as Celestia nodded. Yes, my dear student Twilight, I did, and I think I personally need to go and investigate this occurrence, Celestia said with a frown, as she could feel the power radiating from here, and the major thing that worried her was that it felt on her level. Stay here, and I will be back soon, hopefully, Celestia told her student, as Twilight nodded and watched as she left. Shining armor, gather my guards, fastest flyers. We are heading to Ponyville, Celestia said, as Shining Armor nodded and saluted before signaling the guards with his magic before 10 Pegasi landed, 5 on both sides of them. Stay on guard while I am away shining armor. I will hopefully be back soon, Celestia said before she and the guards took off in the direction of the energy she could feel. It didn't take her long to realize it was coming from the massive tree in the Everfree forest. As she tentatively landed, her guards flanking her, she found the energy around the tree to be peaceful. Honestly, to her it felt like pure nature was radiating off the tree, and by the hordes of birds and animals gathering around the tree it showed she wasn't the only one being put at ease by it. Is the tree dangerous, princess? The captain of her Pegasus guards asked, as Celestia shook her head. I wouldn't say it is dangerous, but I would like to station guards here and put a barrier around it in case unsavory characters try to do anything with it. I want to be alerted the moment any changes happen with it, Celestia said, as the guards saluted her while her eyes were still locked on the tree. She might not feel anything malicious in it, but that didn't mean she wouldn't be cautious about it. Despite the feeling it gave her that it would change things for the better, she was still nervous about it, but decided whatever came of it she'd deal with it then. A few months later, Naruto groaned, as all the muscles in his body felt like they were on fire, and he had been crushed under Gamakichi. As he opened his eyes he was quickly confused, as he found himself inside a massive hollowed-out tree. Where am I? He wondered before he widened his eyes, and quickly looked around. Wait, Kaguya. I remember finishing her off. But what happened next? He thought, as he tried to stand up only for his body to feel off, unaware why until he looked down at his arms which quickly made him widen his eyes. Wait, I have fur? Naruto asked out loud, as his arms looked like Kurama's only with a lighter orange color to them. The further he looked around at his body the more confused and shocked he became, as he noticed his body was that of Kurama's and make up with 9 tails billowing behind him to even the long ears on top of his head. The only difference was that he seemingly had more fur on the top of his head to resemble his spiky hair of sorts with 2 spiky bangs hanging down the sides of his face. Kurama, are you and the others still there? Naruto asked, as he tried to talk to them like he always did only for there to be no response, and he didn't feel any of the Bijuu inside him. I know we won, so did they maybe get pulled out of me by the sage? If so, then where the hell am I? He wondered before he decided the only way he'd get answers was by leaving whatever tree he found himself in. I still have chakra, but it feels off, so for getting out better keep this simple, Naruto thought, as he clenched his fist and punched through the trunk before he started to pull at it and tear off pieces off the wall until a doorway his size was made for him to leave out of. Halt! Stay where you are! A voice ordered out before he looked over to see it came from a winged horse clad in golden armor while 4 others stood beside them. Am I in some sort of odd summon realm, cause I swear those are not how normal horses look, Naruto thought, as they looked much cuter if he had to describe them in any way. He was a bit taken aback as a large white horse landed behind them, as this horse was the size of him with a long blue, green, and pink glittery mane. She, like the horse in the armor, had wings, but unlike the armor, hers were much larger, and she had a long white horn. The horse wore a golden necklace around her neck, and a golden crown on top of her head right above her horn, as her purple eyes looked at him. At ease, Captain, for now, the horse said, as she briefly looked over at the armor-wearing horse before looking at him with a kind smile. I am sorry for my captain, as she was just following orders to keep whatever came out of your tree from leaving until I arrived. My name is Princess Celestia. May I ask your name? Celestia asked, as Naruto nodded, trying to take a step out of his tree before he fell down with a groan. Ugh, stupid weird hind legs, he groaned out before he pushed himself back up with his arms. Sorry, my legs are asleep. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he introduced, as looked at her, and held out a hand towards Celestia only to frown, as he forgot they were horses, and set it back down on the ground. Well, Naruto, it is nice to meet you, but can you tell me how you arrived here, and the cause of the tree? She asked, as Naruto frowned, and rubbed the back of his head a bit. I felt you enter this world, and since then I figure you have been sleeping in hibernation in this tree, she added, making Naruto frown a bit more at the enter this world comment. Well, the thing is that I don't quite remember. I just woke up, and last I remembered I was fighting a goddess. Everything that happened after is blank, Naruto said, as he kept the fact that he used to be human, and anything about the Bijuu a secret for now. Honestly, I'm just shocked at things since my world had horses, but they definitely look different, Naruto said, as Celestia chuckled. We are called ponies here. Those ponies with wings are called Pegasus. Ones with horns are unicorns, and those with either are earth ponies, she explained, as Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. And what are you called? I mean, you are quite bigger than the others, he said before one of the guards beside her stepped forward. Be respectful when talking to our princess like that, they yelled, their wings spread out before Naruto frowned before they watched him sit up until he was to Celestia's height. They already knew he was large, the guards only measuring up to his chest, but as he fully sat up he was much larger than they expected. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound bad. I was just genuinely curious, he said, as he stretched his back a bit, his muscles still being sore, but figured sitting upright was better than being hunched over. That is fine. It is quite alright, Celestia said in a calming tone that eased the Pegasus annoyance away. I am an alicorn, although a special one, as due to my domain I am immortal. Normal alicorns have attributes of all 3 pony classes, and are rare, as there are only 3 around, myself included, and all 3 are princesses, she said, as she understood he wasn't of this world, so all of this was very new to him. Are there other foxes here? Naruto asked, as he was pretty sure they weren't given the odd looks he had gotten from the Pegasi when he first left the tree. Not that I know of, but there could be. For now, would you be against coming back with me to Canterlot? As there are things we still need to discuss, and I feel it might be better to talk in my castle instead of out here in the forest, she said before nodding with a bit of a frown. I'm fine with it, but my legs are pretty sore, so is it close by? He asked before Celestia smiled and waved her hoof at him. I can summon a carriage to take us to Canterlot, so don't worry, she said, as he watched her horn glow, and a large enclosed carriage materialized behind her before its door opened for them. And don't worry, I can help you walk since you seem to be sore, Celestia added, as she noticed him limp forward only to almost fall until she surrounded him in her magic and gently helped him onto the carriage. Stay on guard around the tree until we return the next day. Also, it goes without saying not to mention this to anyone, Celestia said, as the guard saluted her before she closed the carriage door behind her. Thanks, my legs are not working too well right now, Naruto said, as Celestia sat down on one side of the carriage before the Pegasus guards pulling it took off into the sky. That is fine, I expect you are not used to your body? Celestia said, smirking, as she noticed a slight flinch from Naruto. Do not worry, I will not ask if you are not willing to tell, but no, I will offer help if you need it, she added, as he nodded. I've had a body like this somewhat before, but it was different. This might take a while, but at least I have hands, he joked, as opened and closed his hands. I have seen foxes before, but you are definitely the first with hands like that, and with that many tails. When I felt you enter this world, I felt your power, but I am glad you seem to be peaceful, she said with a smile, making Naruto chuckle, as he looked outside the carriage window to see the massive castle that was getting larger. As they got closer, is that your castle? He asked, as Celestia nodded. Yes, and you don't have to worry about anyone seeing you right now, as the guards up front will land us near the throne room so we can talk more, Celestia said, as the carriage started to fly lower to properly land in the throne room. Guards, absolutely no one is to bother us while we are in here. If they need to talk, tell them they can wait until this morning. Also prepare a room for him to stay in for the night nearby, Celestia said, as the guard saluted her while she stepped out of the carriage. She was about to help Naruto out before he waved her off, since he knew he had to learn how to move around eventually. Please sit wherever you like, as there is much to talk about, Celestia said, as she walked up to her throne, watching with a chuckle, as Naruto wobbled a bit, as he walked out of the carriage that quickly disappeared once he was out of it. First though, as ruler of Equestria, I must ask what might be your intentions, as if you plan to be a danger to the inhabitants I will have to deal with you personally, she warned, as she threw open her wings and summoned her magic to put some backing in her threat. Naruto was a bit stunned, as the weight of Celestia's power instantly reminded him of Kaguya, as he also swore the room just got incredibly hotter, the heat radiating off Celestia before he held up his hands. I don't plan to be a danger, honestly. Back in my home before I wound up here, I was fighting against a villain who was trying to put the world under a mass illusion, so I think my alignment is pretty good, he said, as the heat basically vanished instantly, and Celestia tucked back in her wings with a smile. Well, then I see no danger in you, and I am sorry, but I had to find out before telling you about my land, Celestia said, as he waved it off. I understand since I am someone new, and all, Naruto said with a slight chuckle, as he instantly made a mental note not to piss off Celestia since he figured the sun on her but wasn't only for show. As the night went, Celestia did her best to tell Naruto the basics of Equestria, and how things went along in it from cutie marks to currency, and even magic, while Naruto told her about what had happened prior to his arrival here, his world, and their magic called chakra, which interested her a bit. He did, though, keep his human nature and the Bijuu a secret, as he felt those should be saved for much later. They continued to talk throughout the night before she realized just how late it had become. We should probably stop now, as it is getting rather late. We may continue tomorrow, as I have something in mind that might help you become more acclimated, Celestia said, as she stood up, and Naruto frowned, a bit confused, but nodded, as he stretched a bit. If you say so. I don't know how well I'll be able to sleep, but I might, as well, Naruto said, as he stood up, finding it slightly easier to walk now that his muscles had stopped hurting. Guards, please show Naruto to his room for me, please, as I have things to prepare for tomorrow, Celestia said, as 2 guards saluted her, and stood in front of Naruto. Right this way, sir, one of them said, as Naruto nodded, and followed after them. Once out of the throne room, Celestia let out a slight sigh at the work ahead of her before she could lay down, but she knew she wanted to help Naruto after being thrown into this world, so it was the least she could do. Of course, she'd still keep an eye on him until she was fully sure he wasn't a danger, but she felt like he wasn't a real danger. She might have only his word on it, but he didn't give off any feeling of a threat, but as ruler she still had to be careful. Naruto frowned as the door closed behind him before he made his way over to the bed and sat up on it. Okay, so I'm in an entirely new world full of talking horses that like to be called ponies. At least I'm alive, he thought with a sigh before he moved his hand down to his stomach. But I'm all alone, he added, as he could feel the Bijuu's energy in him, but he couldn't feel them. I hope they are just safe back home, and everyone else was able to get out of the illusion, he thought before he shook his head and stood back up off the bed. I can't get all mopey like that. I'm sure the sage helped them or something. They are safe, and so am I. I doubt I'll be able to ever return home, but that doesn't mean I can't make a life here though. First things first, I need to practice moving this new body around, he thought, as he looked at himself and his tails, grateful that the room Celestia put him in was rather large so that he could move around without being cramped. Next morning, Celestia smiled as she watched Naruto enter her large dining room, which was empty at this time in the morning, without nearly as much trouble as he had last night. I hope you slept well, since apparently there were reports of a lot of bumping and crashing around the area of your room. You wouldn't happen to know the cause, would you? She asked with a smirk before he rolled his eyes. Yeah, very funny. I was just having a bit of difficulty with my tails, as they are harder to control than I thought they'd be. You're lucky you have one, as keeping balance with 9 is really difficult, he said, as Celestia chuckled and nodded. Well, I am happy to see you are getting the hang of your new body. I couldn't imagine how that must be, but you seem to be taking it well, she said, as he sat down at one of the seats before she levitated some food over to him. I don't know what your diet is, so I hope you are okay with our food, Celestia said, as Naruto looked over to see foods like pancakes, hash browns, and other regular breakfast food besides the lack of bacon. But then again, he figured with them being horses he doubted that they would eat stuff like that. Yeah, this works, but just curious, ponies don't eat meat, do they? He asked, as Celestia shook her head. Pegasi are known to eat fish sometimes due to their need for protein to keep their wings strong, but other than that really eats meat, Celestia said, as Naruto shrugged his shoulders, as he was found with fish before he picked up the silverware and started to eat. So what's the plan for today? Naruto asked, as he looked towards Celestia, who frowned and made her cup of tea float back down to the table. That is all up to you, Naruto, and where you would like to stay. You are free to live here in the castle with me and the other inhabitants if you like, or we can find you better living situations. As I understand, not every pony is suited for life in Canterlot, Celestia said, as Naruto rubbed the back of his neck with a frown. As much as I am thankful for the offer to stay here, I think somewhere smaller might be better. There are way too many negative emotions here, and somewhere smaller and less royal might be best, he said while Celestia nodded, him having brought up his ability to sense negative emotions last night when he brought up his chakra. I figured you might say something like that, which is why, after breakfast, we will be heading to just the town that I feel will be perfect for you so you can get integrated with pony culture, as well as meet new people and make new friends. I already notified the mayor of the town early this morning, and got a quick reply back, so they are expecting us, Celestia said, as Naruto raised an eyebrow, a bit worried how other ponies might react to him, as the guards so far tended to be a bit jumpy around him. Don't worry, the ponies there are very accepting, plus since your tree is nearby that town we will be able to make excuses for most of the things you will be there to learn, she said, as levitated back up her cup of tea to drink from, as Naruto decided he might as well finish the food before they had to leave. The actual ride to the town was a bit quicker than the ride from the tree to the castle, but as he looked out of the window he was able to see the town below. Most of the houses looked like straw-roofed cottages with a large building in the center of it all. As the carriage landed he backed a bit away from the window, as he could see somewhat of a crowd waiting outside for them. Do not worry, I told the mayor you were different, and a fox, but not dangerous, so I hope that'll help, Celestia said, as the carriage door opened and she stepped out before looking back to encourage him to follow. Naruto paused for a bit in the carriage before letting out a sigh and following after Celestia. He wasn't ashamed of what he was, since in all honesty he'd rather be a fox like Kurama instead of a pony, as he figured the lack of hands would get to him. His nervousness more stemmed from this all being a new world to him, and new people that he'd have to win over again. Oh my, when Princess Celestia said you were a fox I didn't think you'd be that large, or have that many tails, a gray maned mare said, as she pushed up the glasses on the end of her snout up a bit. The mare had blue eyes with a two-toned gray short mane with a matching normal length tail. Her coat was a tannish color, as she wore a white shirt collar with a green handkerchief tied in it. Her cutie mark seemed to be a piece of paper rolled up and tied with a teal ribbon. On behalf of the ponies in Ponyville, I, Mayor Mare, would like to welcome you to our town, Mayor Mare said, as she motioned to the Welcome to Ponyville banner above them, while the ponies cheered behind her. "Thank you, this means a lot," Naruto said with a slight smile, being careful of showing his fangs, as he didn't know how the others would react. This is Naruto Uzumaki. For most of his life he's lived in the Everfree Forest alone until he created the massive tree that sprouted up a few months ago as home. When my guard showed up he stayed hidden, but when I came to check I felt him in there, and I coaxed him out gently. He is new to ponies, having never seen any enter far enough in to find him until now, so I hope you welcome him warmly, Celestia said, as Naruto was impressed by the excuse she created to hide everything about him for now. "Oh my gosh! I've never seen a fox like you before," a pony said in a very soft but excited voice, as Naruto looked down to see who it was. The pony had teal-colored eyes, and had a long pink mane that curled at the end, and a matching pink tail that was a bit longer. Her coat was a pale gold, and her cutie mark was 3 pink butterflies. He was a bit confused, as she kept circling around him, and even went as far as to pet his tails, which made him feel odd until he made them move away from her. "Oh sorry, they just look so soft. I'm Fluttershy. It's really nice to meet you," Fluttershy said, as she looked up at him with stars in her eyes. "I'm sorry about that. Fluttershy is our animal expert, and I thought having her alongside might help make sure you are comfortable here," Mare said, as Naruto nodded. "It's really okay. I was just surprised, as that's the first time someone touched my tails, that's all." "It's nice to meet you though," Naruto said, as he held out his hand towards Fluttershy, who put her hoof in it, and let him shake it. "Well, I must be off, but I will be in contact with you, Naruto, later, as I need to relieve my guards from defending your tree," Celestia said to him before she turned to Mare. "And, as always, it was a pleasure to visit Pony," she added, as the mayor smiled with a light blush, and bowed before Celestia walked back into the carriage that started to drive towards the Everfree Forest. "How about a tour of Ponyville? And then we can find you somewhere to live, and maybe work, since Princess Celestia said to help show you a pony's way of life. You don't mind that, do you?" Mare asked, as he shook his head. "I'm totally fine with helping out around town where it's needed," Naruto said, as Mare smiled up at him before her, and a crowd of other curious ponies that stuck back a bit further behind them walked through town. "I have to say I didn't know there were foxes like you living in the Everfree Forest. Have you met any others of your race?" Fluttershy asked, as Naruto shook his head with a frown. "Been alone for as long as I can remember, so I don't know, but I don't think there are. Honestly, I'm just glad Princess Celestia found me," Naruto said, as he built up on Celestia's cover story. "I mean, your paws aren't like any paws I have ever seen, and your ears are more like rabbits. Plus you have so many long tails," Fluttershy gushed before she embarrassingly covered her mouth once she realized she had been babbling a bit. "I'm sorry, you just are so unique," she said before he waved her off with a chuckle. "Yeah, I guess I am a rather odd fox. I mean, instead of paws I have hands, and my ears are rather odd. But I'm glad a pretty pony like you seem to like how I look," Naruto said, as he did like her pink hair while he moved one of his tails over to pet her head, quickly making the Pegasus blush at the compliment for the magnificent creature before her. "You call your paws hands? How quaint," Mare said with a smile, as Celestia had told him ahead of time how no other pony besides her, and a very select few others, have actually seen hands. He merely chuckled, as they made their way further into Ponyville. Honestly, from what the mayor showed him, he liked the little town. Everyone seemed friendly enough. Although a few acted a bit scared around him, the majority seemed to be either interested in him or okay with him. "Oh my goodness, is that your natural coat?" a female voice asked before a measuring tape held up by magic started to measure parts of him. The female pony was a unicorn with blue eyes and a very curly purple mane and tail. Her coat was a light gray, almost white, with her cutie mark being 3 light blue diamond-shaped gems. "I have to say it is such a lovely shade of orange. Orange is such a hard color to find a good shade in. Too dark, and it's musty, and too bright it hurts your eyes. But yours is splendid, darling," the unicorn said, as Mare chuckled. Rarity met Naruto Uzumaki. He arrived not too long ago with Princess Celestia. Rarity here is Ponyville's best seamstress, and, as you can see, she takes it seriously, Mare said, as Naruto chuckled and held his hand out to the unicorn. "Nice to meet you, Rarity. I'm glad you like my fur," he said, as Rarity looked at his hand before getting stars in her eyes. "My goodness, darling, your nails are exquisite. They are such a graceful natural point, and such a sleek shade of black. And your paws hands," Rarity started to say before Mare corrected her, making Rarity raise an eyebrow before shrugging and going back to his hands. "Well, your hands are simply something I haven't seen, but I can feel they'd be great for helping me out," she said before Mare chuckled. "We'll add your place to one of the possible jobs for him, Rarity. If you want, you may come along and join the crowd for his tour through Ponyville," Mare said, as Rarity frowned and looked back into her shop before nodding. "My work can wait a while, since it isn't every day a marvelous creature like this moves into town. I must come along so he knows the perfect shops to buy care products to keep his coat magnificent," she said, as she stepped out of her shop, turned the sign to close, and stepped to his left since Fluttershy was staying close to his right side. Well then, on we go, Rarity said with a smile up at him, and Mayor Mare nodded with a chuckle, and continued on before the sound of fast rolling wheels made them stop, as they neared the market. Runaway wagon of apples, look out, a voice yelled, as Naruto looked to his left to see a massive wagon barreling down the street towards them. He quickly held out his hands to catch the wagon before hoping he could control his tails enough to help. Thankfully, the practice last night was enough to help, as his tails helped grab the wagon with his hands to immediately make it stop its crash course without anything inside it being damaged. Rarity couldn't help but stare, as she and Fluttershy watched Naruto stand up on his hind legs to catch the wagon, both impressed with how he could stand up like that. Rarity, though, having the sharper eye of the two Mares, was also quick to notice how his muscles flexed as he carefully, but with enough strength to keep them from danger. Oh my, how dashing of you to save us like that, Rarity said with a smile, as Fluttershy nodded with a thankful smile. Who, that was close, thanks partner, a cowboy hat wearing pony said, as she rushed over to them with a smile. The pony lacked any horn or wings, with green eyes, and a dull blonde mane and tail, both of which had a red hair tie at the end to make a, pun unintended, ponytail. Her coat was a warm shade of orange with a few blonde freckles on her cheeks. Her cutie mark was 3 red apples. I do have to say it is mighty impressive how you saved my wagon so easily like that. Normally only my brother can really stop it when it gets out of control. Plus you even saved everything in it, which really saves me, as that's everything we had to sell today, the pony said, as she trotted up to him. The name is Applejack, and here is one of my family's products, as thanks for saving it all, like Applejack said, as she rummaged around in her wagon before tossing him a shiny red apple that one of his tails quickly caught. My, those tails are pretty handy, aren't they? I bet you could harvest a lot of apple trees with them, Applejack said, as Mayor Mare nodded with a smile. We will add your family's acres to possible jobs for him. We are just giving Naruto here a tour of Ponyville first before we help him figure out where to live and work, as she said, as Applejack looked away from Naruto and nodded at the mayor. I heard about the princess coming to town to introduce some pony, but I really couldn't show up since I had to get our stuff ready to sell. Nice that I was still able to meet you, Applejack said, as she tilted her hat at him with a smile. Wait, you know the princess? Rarity asked, as Naruto nodded with a bit of a frown. Yes, she brought me to town, and I even got to stay in the castle for a night before coming here. Mayor Mare mentioned her when she introduced you to me, didn't she? He said, as Mayor Mare nodded before Rarity blushed. I was probably too focused on your coat. Now I feel foolish, she said, as she covered one of her cheeks with her hoof to hide it. Don't worry about it, Rarity. I was the same when he showed up, Fluttershy said with a giggle before Applejack chuckled. As much as I would love to stick around, I really got to get this to the market. My brother is waiting for me. I'll catch you around, Applejack said before she started to pull the wagon off towards the market. I could have saved the wagon too. You know, a female voice said above them before Naruto looked up to see a Pegasus lying on top of a cloud that hovered above them. The Pegasus was rather colorful with reddish-violet eyes, a pale blue coat, and a mane that was like a rainbow, with it having streaks of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. Her cutie mark, from what he could see, was a cloud with a red, yellow, and blue-colored lightning bolt coming out of it. And if I had been there, I would have done it so much faster, the Pegasus said, as Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. I think he did a very good job in saving us, Rainbow Dash Fluttershy said, as Rarity nodded. He was like a knight with how he stepped in front of us to save us. It was very admirable, Rarity said before Rainbow Dash flew off her cloud before stopping in front of Naruto. So you're the one everyone is making a fuss over. I guess you seem pretty cool. Though you'd be cooler if you could fly, she added, as Naruto chuckled. Glad you think I'm cool, he said, a little unsure, but decided to take it as a compliment of sorts. Well, I got to go clear up the skies. You can come watch some other time, since I bet you've never seen it done so fast, she said before she darted off, shooting back into the sky with a rainbow trail being left behind her. My, everybody just seems to be popping up around you, Mayor Mare teased, finding it interesting how others kept showing up around them. Now come on, we are nearly done with our tour, Mayor Mare said, as they nodded and continued to follow her. By the end of the tour, lunch had rolled around, and Mayor Mare had decided to bring him to a place that looked like a gingerbread house with a cupcake tower rising up from the center of its roof. Welcome to Sugarcube Corner, one of Ponyville's best confectionaries, Mayor Mare said, as she, Fluttershy, and Rarity, the three that had stuck around till the end, entered the shop before frowning, as they saw Naruto was a bit too big for the door. Do you need help, darling? Rarity asked, as Naruto shook his head before he squeezed into the door only to fall through as, much to his surprise, he quickly shrunk to a smaller size. Whoa, I didn't know you could become smaller, Fluttershy said with starry eyes at the prospect of learning something new about him. Is this your species' form of magic? She asked, as Naruto frowned, looking down at his arms and body before shrugging his shoulders. I guess. I've never done this before, so it is definitely known. I wonder if I leave, I'll go back to my normal size, he said before thinking aloud, and walking out to find him quickly returning to his previous size. Whoa, that makes fitting you for clothes perfect since you can fit anything, Rarity said with an excited smile which made him chuckle, as he came back inside, and shrunk back down, and followed them to a nearby table for them to talk to, and make an order once they were done. Only if I can learn how to control it. But just so you know, I will wear shirts and pants, if they work with my legs. No dresses though, he said, as Rarity nodded with a very slight frown that made him roll his eyes at. So how do you like Ponyville so far? Mayor Mare asked, as he rubbed his chin in thought. It was different than I thought it would be, but in a good way. I actually like it here, it feels nice and calm, he said, as Mayor Mare looked very happy while Fluttershy and Rarity did, as well. So all that needs to be decided is somewhere for you to stay, and possibly work at, Mayor Mare said, as Rarity and Fluttershy were about to speak only for someone to beat them to it. You can always stay and work here. There is a basement underneath, a female voice said, as Naruto turned around to see a new pony smiling behind him. This pony was incredibly pink with light blue eyes. Her mane and tail were a hot pink color, and looked almost like cotton candy, while her coat was a much lighter pink, as her cutie mark were 3 balloons. But Pinky is Ms. Cake's place, so I don't think you can offer her basement to Naruto, Fluttershy said before Pinky bounced over to her. She's been looking to rent the basement out, and if he needs a place and somewhere to work, this goes together perfectly. Wait right here, I'll go grab her, Pinky said excitedly before darting off before anyone could say anything else. I'm sorry, our friend Pinkie Pie can be rather hyper, Rarity said, as Naruto chuckled, as he could definitely see that. Here, this is Naruto Ms. Cake. He wants to rent the basement out and work for you, Pinky said, as she excitedly pulled along a female pony. The pony was an earth pony with soft purple eyes and a two-tone pink mane and tail that both made him think of icing. Her coat was a light cerulean, and her cutie marks were 3 pink cherry-topped cupcakes. She also wore a pair of pink orb earrings and a yellow apron that covered her chest only, that had pink frills around the armholes for it. Oh my Mayor, I didn't know you were here, and with a guest, Mrs. Cake said, as she looked at Naruto with a smile. I just finished touring Naruto here through Ponyville after Celestia brought him here, and I figured why not show him one of Ponyville's top confectionaries. We were also talking about possible places for him to work and live when Pinkie Pie ran off to get you, Mayor Mare said with a giggle. Well, the dearie is rather excitable, she said before holding out a hoof to Naruto. It is nice to meet you, Naruto. I am Ms. Cupcake. I run this shop with Pinkie here helping me out, she said, as he shook her hoof. It is very nice to meet you, Ms. Cupcake, and while I am in need of a place to stay and work, I wouldn't want to pressure you into allowing me, he said, as Ms. Cake smiled and waved him off with her hoof once he let it go. You don't have to call me by my full name. Cup or Ms. Cake is fine. And actually, Pinky is right. I have been looking to rent out my basement, and getting some extra help around the store is always a benefit, especially with your unique hoofs, she said, as he smiled. They are called hands, and if you are serious about welcoming me here, then I will be very thankful, Naruto said before Pinky cheered and surprised Naruto by hugging him from behind. Yay, new neighbor friend workmate, Pinky cheered, as the others chuckled, and Naruto turned to Mayor Mare, who smiled at him. I was originally going to offer to let you stay in one of the spare bedrooms at Town Hall, but I do feel this is for the best. As for jobs, I feel your hands will be very useful here, she said, as he frowned and rubbed his chin. Actually, I was thinking, could you make me a list of other places in need of help? If I can get back into the rhythm with something I know I can do, I might be able to help out a lot around here, he said, as Mayor Mare nodded with a smile. That sounds amazing, as a lot of places do need the help. I'll get back to you right away. But right now I think we should officially celebrate you finding a place to live, Mayor Mare cheered, as the others clapped along. Naruto couldn't help but smile, as the fear of fitting in and getting used to this world grew less and less the more he stayed around these ponies. He might be in a new world, but he was safe and alive, meaning he could make a new life here. And right now that didn't sound all that bad to him. Naruto chuckled as a sparrow landed on his nose while he sat in Fluttershy's living room. For the last few months he had been spending time with various ponies around Ponyville, and for the most part he has been enjoying himself. All the ponies were incredibly nice, and, after a brief bit of being nervous around him, they welcomed him with open, hooves, and in return he helped them, as after a bit of training he had finally gotten his shadow clones back. It had taken a while, but after some training in Ms. Cake's basement, he got his chakra back in line to use again to at least the level of shadow clones, walking on water, and the Rasengan. Thankfully the clones only seemed to get more durable in this world, as he tested them out, and it took a moderate pummeling to make them dispel, which made them great for helping around. He guessed it was due to the natural energy he could feel absorbing into him naturally, giving all of his clones extra durability. The clones mainly allowed him to help out more around town, from Applejack's farm, Rarity's boutique, to even a few other businesses that were on the list Mayor had given him. Most of the time though he personally helped out with either Ms. Cake, Applejack, or Rarity. Right now though he was having a get-together with Fluttershy that was a rather normal occurrence since with her cutie mark had to deal with her ability with animals. She often liked to write down stuff about him that she found out or noticed. Honestly, he was impressed how devoted to animals she was, and how smart she was about various animals. So Naruto, how is your ability to control your size? Fluttershy asked before giggling, as various birds started to sit down and get comfy on his tails. Pretty good, I've been able to go as small as a colt after visiting the school, and I can even go my full size inside houses, Naruto said, as he grew up from his pony size form up to his normal size before shrinking back down once his head got too close to the ceiling. And how good is your control over your tails? She asked before she kept the tail not being taken by birds moved over to pet her head, which she leaned into a bit before blushing once he moved his tail away. They are still like sets of extra arms, very useful for jobs around town, and they can support a lot of weight, so they definitely come in handy, he said, as Fluttershy nodded before coughing into her hoof. How well is your progress on regaining control of your magic? Fluttershy asked before she leapt up with a loud squeak, as a clone startled her, making her pout before it dispelled. It's going good, same as usual, he said, as he picked her up out of the air, and pulled her down onto his lap, and made her face him, as he was sitting with his legs crossed before he pet her head, as she continued to pout. I'm sorry for scaring you, but I can't help it since you're pretty adorable when you get scared, he said before he started to scratch behind her ears, quickly making her pout dissolve, and a smile replaced it. He didn't quite know when it started like this, but recently he found himself holding Fluttershy like this whenever they were alone, as a part of him felt at peace with her in his arms. Maybe it had something to do with her cutie mark skill, but he still wasn't sure. Though you always are cute like this, he mumbled, as Fluttershy smiled, and nuzzled against his chest, as he rested his head on top of hers with a smile. He frowned a bit though, as he buried his nose in her hair, quickly finding himself annoyed, as he started to feel a weird gnawing feeling in his chest. For the last month or so he had started to feel it more, and while it somewhat lessened when he was close like this, it never fully went away, and being close only helped for so long before it became worse. Fluttershy's blush only grew, as Naruto, unaware of what his hands were doing, started to pet her back. She tried to look up at him to try, and maybe get him to notice until she had to hold in an eep, as she felt his hands press against the space in between her wings, which quickly got her wings to jet out. Naruto continued to pet her wings, still in a daze, as she quivered in his arms, and let out cute eeps from his hands while she buried her face further in his chest, which didn't help his daze, and neither did her panting. It started to get worse, and worse, as she continued to let out more eeps, and even started to pant into his chest, her scent being more powerful to him. He frowned a bit, as he found him burying his face in the top of her head, his breath now tickling her ears, and making them twitch. He honestly would have continued, but, as Fluttershy looked up at him, still panting with glossy eyes, it was like dousing his body in cold water, allowing him to quickly set her down, and quickly move himself back a bit. I'm sorry there, Fluttershy. I didn't know your wings were sensitive like that, he said, grateful for his orange fur, as if not for it he felt his blush would be visible. Fluttershy blushed a bit, as she waved it off with her hoof with a smile. It's okay, honestly. You still are learning about ponies, Fluttershy said, as she noticed a small white rabbit tapping her on the leg with an angry look on its face. Oh, I'm sorry, Angel, you probably want some lunch, Fluttershy said before various birds started to fly around her. Yes, I'll get to you all. Don't worry, Fluttershy said, as she extended her wings for them to land on while Angel frowned, and hopped in between her hind legs and grabbed her tail. Wait, Angel, what are you doing? Fluttershy asked worriedly before Angel started to pull her long tail around. The small rabbit was fast, as it started pooping her tail around, and crisscrossing her legs before tying the end of it around her ankle, and poking her ankle, causing her to topple over. Angel, sweetie, please untie me, Fluttershy begged before she rolled over onto her back, and started to wiggle in an attempt to get free. Naruto froze, as he watched the sight before him, which definitely wasn't helping his situation, as with Fluttershy's tail up, and her on her back, everything was in clear view. It hadn't taken long after he moved into town for him to visit the library to learn certain things about the species living around him. This of course meant their biology, as he found himself looking straight at Fluttershy's. His cheeks felt on fire, as he stared at her marehood, which looked relatively like the human version, only the area around it to be a darker shade than the rest of her coat. From how little open it was, he figured she was a virgin, while a pink nub poked out at the top of it, making him wonder if holding and touching her actually had an effect on her. Though that thought quickly flew out his mind, as with the sight before him not much actually thinking was going on. The other part of the view that was putting him in a daze was what could only be described as her upai, which in this world were called teats, which were oddly located between a mare's back legs, and often hidden by their tail like their marehood would normally be, as well. Hers, from what he embarrassingly read under the hinge of a random cult disguise he put together, were rather large for Pegasi. He couldn't really go off cup size since mares didn't wear bras. Butchers were at least more than a handful for his pony-sized form when normally they were rather flat due to Pegasi needing to be aerodynamic to fly. He also learned that earth ponies were rather large while unicorns were somewhere in the middle. But still that only made Fluttershy's even more stunning since, from the few he had seen flashes of from earth ponies, hers were still the biggest he had seen so far. Honestly, he didn't know how long he had been staring at her exposed parts, but he found himself quickly snapped out of it once the animals around him quickly started acting weird. The ones he knew were males all seemed to back away from him, and acted oddly submissive while the females all somewhat scooted closer started to present themselves to him, which made him quickly aware that something was up. It was then he really noticed how hard he had been breathing, and actually had been creeping closer towards Fluttershy. He quickly shook his head, as he tried to calm himself down, knowing the animals were telling him basically that his pheromones were flaring. This had all mainly started acting up after the first real month he had spent in Ponyville. He figured, as embarrassing as it was at the time, that his new animalistic body was reacting to all the mares around him. He quickly found out around then that he could smell them, and their rather amazing scents, to his new body, with his powerful nose, and when around them too much it quickly sent him into a somewhat animalistic haze. Though before he ever did anything he always found some way to clear his head, with this being the closest he ever got to doing anything, although he never has been able to get fully rid of it, and instead mainly suppresses it, which only so far has made it continuously pile on whenever it came back up, making each flare up more and more difficult for him to control himself during. "I got to go, I'll see you later, bye," Naruto said in a rush before he bolted out of Fluttershy's house, as fast as he could to get himself away from her, and her scent for now. As Naruto rushed out, Fluttershy's eyes widened, and her face grew beet red, as she stopped struggling, and just realized what position she was in, and what was visible in front of her male friend. Angel, somewhat sensing her shock and embarrassment, decided to untie her, which allowed the Pegasus to quickly shoot off, and bury herself under one of her living room's comforters. "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I can't believe he saw all of that. I can't leave my house now," Fluttershy whimpered out, as she buried her face in a pillow while the animals around her tried her best to console her, hoping she wasn't serious about it. Angel though frowned, as he sat on the nearby table, as he only did that to try and help his friend get the male he knew she liked. Hell, all the animals knew she had a crush on the fox, but they all knew Fluttershy wouldn't make a move. She did have Shy in her name after all, though maybe he went too far this time. Naruto quickly ran his way through Ponyville, easily able to weave himself through crowds by shrinking himself, hoping to make it back to his room in the basement of the Sugar Cube Corner, as fast as possible, as the smell of their sweets often helped mask the smell of mares and offer him some faint relief. Thankfully though, as he quickly entered the shop, there were no customers. Though being here didn't mean he was safe either, as sometimes being here was the worst for him, but right now home was better than nothing. "Whoa there pal, where's the rush?" Pinky asked, as she jumped out from behind the counter, and quickly captured him in a hug, causing him to go on his hind legs to catch her, as she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in the crook of his neck. "I missed you while you were at Fluttershy's, did you miss me as well?" Pinky asked, as she talked into the crook of his neck with a smile evident in her voice. He frowned, as he wrapped his arms carefully around her torso, daring not to go further down despite the urge to give Pinky's rather plump backside. He also could only nod in response to her question, not really trusting his voice not to sound like a growl. What really was making it difficult for him to stay calm was the fact, due to still being in his pony size, were pressed up against him while dangerously close to his crotch due to their size. Pinky's were just barely smaller than Fluttershy's and, from what he could feel right now, incredibly soft. It took everything in him not to get hard from the sensation, or to not slide his hands down to grab her ass. "Yay, you miss me," she squealed, as she nuzzled her face into his neck more before Naruto instinctively buried his face in the crook of her neck, as well, and inhaled only to smell chocolate more than anything. "You smell really good," he somewhat growled out, slowly moving his nose and mouth up her neck until he got to her cheek before Pinky smiled and pulled away slowly. "Do I really?" she asked, as Naruto nodded, still trying to keep calm, as now her face was inches from his. "Yeah, you smell a lot like chocolate, more than normal." "It smells really delicious," he said, as Pinky's scent always smelled of sweets that only seemed to strengthen her mere scent, but right now it was much more than normal. He was a bit frozen, as with their faces this close, and with him in his haze he felt like he might lean too far forward and possibly kiss the mare in front of him. Something as simple as a kiss easily being enough to push him over the edge and possibly lose it. He was grateful and a bit frustrated as Pinky pulled her head away to smell herself with a giggle. "Oh," she said before she giggled, "that's probably because I was covered in chocolate cake batter a bit ago. It was all over me. I tried to lick it all off, but Ms. Cake made me take a bath," she said with a bit of a pout. "That's a waste of perfectly good chocolate," he growled out, cursing himself, as he imagined the pink mare covered in chocolate, which definitely wasn't helping. "I know, right? I told her I wanted to eat it or save you some, but she said no," she said with a pout before, much to Naruto's relief, she pulled her arms off from around him. He was also very grateful to Ms. Cake for not allowing a chocolate-covered Pinkie Pie to be his first sight, as in this state it wouldn't have helped at all. "So how did your thing with Fluttershy go?" Pinkie asked, as she bounced around him, making him struggle not to stare, as every time she fell down her tail would raise up and basically flash him. Unlike Fluttershy, the lips of her marehood were more full, and not that much darker than the rest of her coat. And she had a plumper ass compared to Fluttershy, which he could see jiggle with each bounce. It was a rather amazing and mesmerizing sight, but right now it was making things unbearable. "Things were good. I'm pretty tired, so I'm going to lay down," he said quickly, as he tore his eyes away from her and quickly rushed down to his room in the basement, missing the pout on Pinkie's face as she stopped bouncing. He quickly fell onto his bed, burying his face in his pillow, as he desperately had to leave. The images of Pinkie bent over the counter of the shop, her plump flank covered in chocolate, that had started to play through his head were way too difficult to keep out of his head around the mare. "Damn alluring maras, I really need to just stay away from them for the rest of today," he thought with a sigh. "Today isn't my day," he added before he looked around his room. The basement he lived in was rather large, but also spacious given that he really didn't have anything yet. Right now the only thing in it was a bed big enough to fit his pony-sized self, which was the natural size he took indoors, along with a desk and stool for him to use, and finally a storage trunk that was empty. All in all, it was a pretty good room, and very useful for evading the sense of maras, as, being the basement, there were no windows. Most of the time any scent dissipated by the time it reached him other than Pinkie and Ms. Cake's diluted smells. "Maybe a nap will help calm me down," he thought, as he closed his eyes and wrapped his tails around him before he passed out from the stressful afternoon. He though found himself woken up by the sound of someone calling for him from above him. "Naruto dearie, can you come and help me? Pinkie is off with evening deliveries, and I really need the help," Ms. Cake called out, as he sighed, still feeling on edge, as the nap didn't help, before he crawled out of bed. "Coming, Ms. Cake," he called out while making his way up the stairs, only to freeze as he got into the kitchen in the back of the shop to see a view that definitely wasn't helping him. Ms. Cake, as much as he was embarrassed by the fact he stared, had the plumpest flank he had seen so far in Ponyville, to the point her tail did little to cover it up. He figured, never having grabbed it, that it was at least more than a handful with normal size, which was saying a lot. How in that size he measured up to Celestia. From just looking at it he definitely knew it wasn't muscular or really toned, and instead just pure soft and seemingly enjoyable fat, especially by how it constantly jiggled with each step she took, which made it that much harder not to stare. It fit the rest of Ms. Cake, as she was a bit heavier than most maras, which made sense given her job, but to him it really worked with her, as he doubted she'd look skinnier given she would lose not only her ass, but probably some of the chub on her stomach. Personally, it made her all the more appealing to him. "I'm here. What do you need help with?" Naruto asked, as he tore his eyes away from her ass that jiggled each time she pressed down on the dough to knead it. "Can you whisk the icing over there for me? I really need it made and put into the fridge for tomorrow," she said with a smile, as she pointed to the table behind her before he nodded and slowly walked over to it, his eyes having drifted right back to her rear once he sat down, since it was basically right in front of him. He absent-mindedly stirred the icing, as for the most part he was struggling between staring and doing his best to try to look anywhere but the jiggling flank in front of him. So far staring was winning, and he really didn't like it. Right now he was hating the drawback to his new body and how it recently started to make him feel and act this way. This new animal body coming with animal desires made it really hard to control, as he was having troubles with right now since his eyes were still glued to Ms. Cake's smaller frame and plump ass. "So the recipes you gave me, the machi and dango, are a big hit with the ponies around town. Plus, since my store is the only one that offers them, it's been helping a lot with getting customers," Ms. Cake said with a smile, as she looked over her shoulder to see Naruto whisking away at the icing. "I'm glad it's helping, and that I was actually able to remember the recipes," Naruto said, thankful he was able to tear his eyes away just before she fully turned her head, as if he hadn't. Things would have gotten awkward. "I've been meaning to ask how you handle doing all these jobs around Ponyville. I know you use your magic to make duplicates of yourself, but still I worry about you, dearie, and don't want you running yourself into the ground with your generosity," Ms. Cake said before chuckling, as she held her hoof up to her chin. "Though from what I hear around town you might have to worry about some single Maras coming your way, since many Maras around have been saying what an eyeful you are. Maras really like how sweet, kind, helpful, and not to mention, exotic you are, since in a small town like this it's charming to them," she added with a smile, chuckling at the groan she could hear behind her, unaware it was one of annoyance and not embarrassment. Naruto right now honestly didn't need Maras trying to put the moves on him, since he was having troubles just being around Maras in general right now. "Thanks for worrying, but I'm fine since my clones don't wear me down at all, as I've been able to use them since I was a kid. And again, I can make more to help out here if you want, so you can relax more," he said before Ms. Cake gave him a rather adorable pout before putting one of her hooves on her hips, unintentionally making it jiggle even more as she turned around. "I may be an old mare, but I am still able to do my job. Plus you do so much for me already that I can't ask you to busy yourself like that. It is always sweet that you offer those," she said with a smile before she turned back to the dough and started to absent-mindedly sway her hips, which, with how much her flank was jiggling and swaying, was quickening his breaking point. "Honestly, you aren't an old mare. In fact, you are quite the sexy and stunning mare," Naruto whispered in her ear, as he had made his way towards her until he was right behind her, pressing himself right up against her rear. He had taken advantage of such a nice mare that let him live with her. "Let's get you to bed and clean up at least," Naruto thought with a frown, as that was the least he could do after everything he had done to her, as he gently carried her up to the bathroom, having a clone quickly mop up, and another to finish the dough, and icing like intended, as he gently entered the shower with her. The hot water had no effect on her, as he felt a bit off washing her, but he kind of had to clean her up and wash himself of her scent that basically covered him due to how much of a squirter she was. Thankfully it didn't take too long, and after drying them both off, her more than him at the time, he was able to set her down in her bed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Cake, I understand if you hate me, and if you can hear me, and want me to move out or, I don't know, report me, then go ahead," Naruto said before he left the room with a sigh. Ms. Cake though, just as Naruto left, started to frown, as she tossed and turned a bit. "I'm a slutty mare," she mumbled out repeatedly in her sleep with a frown, as the burning heat inside her was gone. Naruto didn't hear any of it, as he had already made his way down to the shop only to somewhat panic, as Pinky hopped into the house. "Oh hi Naruto, feeling better?" Pinky said with a happy smile that made Naruto frown a bit. "Yeah, Ms. Cake called for me to help with some icing, as she needed some dough, but she kind of had to lay down," he said, as Pinky frowned worriedly. "Oh really? Is she okay?" Pinky asked with a somewhat worried tone, as Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I helped her get up to her bed, and made her lay down while my clones finished things up," he added before rubbing the back of his neck. "And actually I'm going to head to bed really early tonight. My clones can still help if you need them," he added, as he really just wanted to go down to his room and avoid them for a while. "They should be able to handle it, so no worries." "I hope you feel better," Pinky said, as Naruto nodded, and she watched Naruto head down to his room. As Naruto lay down on his bed, he couldn't help but frown, as he buried his head under his pillow, as he was so conflicted. A part of him was glad he got some relief and release, as it cleared up his head quite a lot, but the larger part was upset because of how he got it. He had not only basically forced himself on Ms. Cake, but also had been way too rough with her to the point she passed out to where the hot water of the shower hadn't stirred her. He was afraid that he might have broken some of the bonds he had made in this town so far because he couldn't control himself. Ms. Cake, Pinky, and who knows how many others would see him as some horny animal that forced himself on Maras if they learned about what he had done. "I just need to stay away from Maras until I find some way to control this new part of me," he thought with a sigh before he decided he'd figure it out more in the morning. A week later, Naruto sighed, as laid hidden in one of the many trees in Sweet Apple Acres, trying to avoid Maras as best as he could while clones worked around town, and so far it was about the same as he had been. It wasn't even just Maras being close that got him hot under the collar, as the same effect happened by just their lingering scents. It ended up dispelling his clones at the end of the day, even worse for him from having all the reactions of all of his clones to various Maras hit him all at once. So far he was managing just barely by avoiding them, as best he could with his real self, since reacting to it directly made things much worse, but even he knew he could only avoid them for so long. He still felt terrible about what he did to Ms. Cake, and honestly he was afraid to talk to her. She hadn't yelled at him or anything, but every time she looked at him she only did so for a brief second before turning her eyes elsewhere. And honestly he didn't blame her for it, considering what he had done to her. So far he has tried everything he knew to help himself, from meditation to training, and even just exercise, but absolutely nothing worked, and he could only make up excuses to stay away from Ms. Cake for only so long. Plus he needed to find some solution, as even Sweet Apple Acres wasn't as safe as he thought it would be, considering the smell of apples overpowering everything should be helping. While it did help somewhat, the sight of Applejack rinsing herself off with a hose definitely wasn't. He tried not to stare, but with everything else getting under his collar, so to speak, his eyes couldn't look away no matter how hard he was trying, since Applejack looked amazing while wet. Her coat looked amazing, as it was matted against her body from the water. Her hair and tail let out of their ponytails, and both stuck to her body and dripped wet. It especially made her flank look amazing, as her tail stuck to it and showed off her cheeks, which, as he was looking intently at it for the first time, allowed him to see how she had blonde freckles scattered across her flank as well. Why is it every time I am trying to stay calm I see stuff this amazing, he thought with a groan, as he quickly tried to shake it out of his head, already noticing he was starting to pant a bit. "What ya doing?" A familiar voice spoke out before he felt a figure fall down onto his back, and he looked back to see a very familiar pink pony smiling at him. This though thankfully allowed him to tear his eyes away from the dripping mare in front of the barn. "Pinky, how did you find me?" Naruto asked, as the pink mare had appeared suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere. "I just felt you might be hiding here since you've been running away a lot. I had to check a lot of trees before I finally found you," Pinky said, as she wrapped her arms around his neck with a smile and hugged him tightly, pressing her body against his teats and all. "Pinky, can you not hug me so tight?" he asked, as her teats being pressed against him was really not helping him at all. "No, you've been avoiding me and every pony so much recently." "What is wrong with Naruto?" she asked, as Naruto sighed and looked away from her. "I'm sorry, it's just I'm trying to get control over something that is a bit dangerous," he said, as Pinky whined and set her head on top of his. "You don't have to do it alone though. You should let some pony help you, as there are ponies that care and will be willing to help you," Pinky said, as Naruto frowned a bit. While, as sweet as that sounded, it didn't work too well with his problem. "With my problem, having others help might make things worse. Thank you for worrying though," he said, as he patted her on the head, making the mare smile before she kissed the top of his head. "Of course, you're my friend. I hope you can find help soon," she said before she gave him one last tight hug, which he swore he felt her grind against him for the briefest second before the pink mare leapt off him and disappeared. He let out a slight sigh at Pinky's sudden arrival and disappearance, chalking it up to one of the mysteries that makes Pinky unique, as well as her advice. "I honestly don't think there is anyone who can help. I mean, any doctor would be unsure given how I'm the only fox here, and I think I'm too unique for a vet to be of help," he thought, as he frowned and looked up at the sky. "And I doubt going to Celestia will do me any good, since if she learned what I did she might banish me for taking advantage of Ms. Cake like that. But I'm reaching my wits' end," he continued before sighing and flinching, as two clones dispelled after they finished their jobs, their lust crashing back into him, as one had been flashed by a clumsy mare, and the other was surrounded by maras. "I can't handle this. Maybe I do need help with someone to talk to," Naruto thought, as he was honestly running out of options. "Might as well go to where an open offer to talk is available," he added before he leapt off the tree he was on, and quickly made his way back towards town hall. Naruto was a bit worried about coming here honestly, as he followed Mayor Mare's secretary towards her office. He didn't know if Mayor Mare would be able to help, but she did tell him to come to her if he needed anything, and honestly he had nowhere else to go in town besides her, as with her being the mayor of the town she might know. And if worse came to worse, then he figured he could always just move out of town past where Fluttershy lived, as he had already made trips into Everfree Forest, and the creatures inside it didn't bother him. Plus that way he wouldn't be a danger to the Maras, and possibly hurt them because of his lack of control. "Oh Naruto, what do I owe this pleasure?" Mayor Mare asked with a smile before the secretary left them, and she motioned for him to enter and sit down. "Well, I kind of need help, and I figured you might be the only one to help right now, besides Celestia. Although I feel like she's the more dangerous choice," he said, as the mayor frowned and nodded. "Please tell me what is bothering you so I can see if I can be of help," Mayor Mare said, as she gave him a reassuring smile before he sighed. "Well, I've been having troubles. You see, my nose is strong, like crazy strong, and when I'm around Maras I smell them. At first it didn't bother me, but now it is making me," he tried to say before he buried his face in his hand. "I really didn't think it'd be this embarrassing to say," he said before Mayor Mare smiled softly at him. "Don't be embarrassed. I might be an old mare, but I like to think I am easy to talk to," she said, as he cleared his throat with a frown. "You aren't old looking at all. I mean, you look so young with your amazing shade of silver hair," he said, making the mayor blush and giggle. "Oh my, aren't you the sweetest? But I don't think you came here just to compliment me," she said before he groaned and covered his face. "See, this is the problem I'm having. When I'm around Maras and pick up on their scents, it gets me hot and bothered. I've tried to keep a level head, but I still do stuff like flirting or worse," he said, as he looked away from Mayor Mare, who was silent as she listened to him. About a week ago it got really bad. Like extra bad, where everything was just making me worse. And I ended up forcing myself onto a mare. I mean, I actually had sags with them to the point they kind of passed out, he said, grateful that his fur was hiding his blush rather well before he was taken aback, as Mare started to giggle. Oh my, you had me worried there for a moment, Naruto. I thought you had murdered some pony with how serious you sounded, she said, as Naruto frowned at her. But I forced myself on a mare, he said, trying to stress the point, as Mare nodded. Yes, and that would be bad, if the mare actually reported it. You said it has been a week since then, and my office hasn't gotten any report. And trust me, in a town heavily populated by maras we react fast to stuff like this. As heavily rare as it is, she said, as Naruto frowned, and looked down before Mare held her hoof out to get his attention. But if you still feel bad about it, I recommend talking to this mare. See how she feels about it after the fact. Though I doubt she will be too upset about it, she added before he nodded, a slight frown still on his face. But why are you acting so calm when I said I lost control? Shouldn't you be more worried? He asked before Mare waved him off with her hoof. Honestly, Celestia expected this situation to happen, but not for a while longer, she said before frowning at his confused expression. You see, she figured, after reading over my copy of Fluttershy's notes on your biology, that you had some similarities to dragons in terms of how they are very sexually active when they are of age, as they tend to release pheromones to attract partners and react to pheromones around them. Fluttershy mentioned how animals tend to act out around you at times, the males acting submissive and the females presenting. So Celestia told me should there be a time you started showing signs to help you, and to explain things like how sags is probably different to maras than you are used to. Mare said with a smile that made Naruto feel better that at least, as far as it seemed, Ms. Cake wasn't going to report him. But it all depended on how it went when he talked with her. You see, Naruto, sags for some maras is probably different than you are used to. They mainly use it as a way to reproduce since birth rates have been declining recently. Plus, added with the lack of stallions and the fact the number of sterile ones are going up makes it where most maras are much more open to quick sags to try for kids, she said, as Naruto frowned. As to him, that sounded wrong. Really? So it's just get on and just do it quickly for kids? He asked, as Mare frowned and nodded. That is ridiculous. Sags is supposed to be passionate and full of pleasure. It's a way to bond with your partner, but also be fun. A guy really shouldn't just hop on and do a few pumps, but instead do everything he can to please the mare until she is gushing like crazy. At least that's what I did with the mare I was with, he said, quickly finding himself embarrassed by how Mare was looking at him with a blush on her face before she cleared her throat into her hoof. Well, some married couples do it for more, but still not to the extent you mentioned from what I've heard among some gossipy maras. But still, this system favors young maras since most stallions prefer to go after than ones my age, she said with a sigh, as Naruto scoffed and rolled his eyes. That's crazy. Maras like you are just as sexy, if not more so, than younger ones. I mean, they are more mature and developed, he said, as the mayor giggled with a smile. I am happy to hear some pony has eyes for maras like myself, though I am quite curious why you think so, as it is quite uncommon. What makes, as a random example, an older mare like myself sexy to you? She asked, as she stood up and started to walk out from behind her desk. Well, Naruto said, as he watched, as the mayor started to walk around him with a sway to her hips, I would have to say your short mane, as well as your figure first, he finished, as she walked behind him, flicking her tail enough to give him the briefest flash of what was hidden underneath. Mare couldn't hide her smirk, as Naruto's eyes were locked onto her flank, as she continued to walk around him. In all honesty, she was absolutely loving the way he was looking at her, as it was something she hadn't felt in years. Even back then it wasn't nearly as intense as Naruto was looking at her right now. It made her shiver, as he had such an intense, passionate, and wild look in his eyes, as if he was about to pounce on her at any second, and she absolutely loved it. I'm so glad you like my mane since I don't get it style. But I am even more curious what you mean about my figure, she said, as she stopped in front of him, her flank closest to him before she swayed it slightly, and turned around to give him a view of her full body. Well, your flank is very lovely, it looks very soft yet firm, Naruto said, as he started to pant softly, as Mare smiled, and turned back around to give him a better view, as she looked over her shoulder at it. Really? I always thought it looked too small. You don't think it's too small? She asked, as she shook it a bit before he shook his head. Unknown to either of them, as they slept, the mayor's secretary poked her head in, as she had heard everything, as with only being room away it was impossible not to, especially considering how loud her boss had been. The secretary blushed a bit, as she was hit in the face by the smell of sags and the heat of the room. She is so lucky she pays me well, and that working here isn't a bother. Guess I'll have to clear her schedule, she thought, as she blushed a bit, curious as to how good it actually felt to be with Naruto considering how much her boss moaned and screamed. She was a bit confused about how her boss seemed to be on Naruto's lap, never having heard of that being a mating style, but figured she'd get an answer from her boss later, as she closed the door. Naruto was the first to wake up, figuring by how the sun was setting that they had been asleep for a few hours. He couldn't help but smile, as he noticed Mare still asleep on his chest, a smile on her face, as she nuzzled up to him. "You're still here," she said softly with a smile, as he petted her head. "Of course I'd still be here. There is no way I'd just get up and leave like that while you sleep after what we just did together," he said, as Mare smiled happily, touched by his words, and that he wasn't just focused on sags like some stallions were. Once it ended, she smiled, and nuzzled back against his chest with a smile. As she enjoyed the sound of the heartbeat she fell asleep to, and he enjoyed how warm and soft she was in his arms. He quickly found his hands quickly back on her flank, as honestly he really liked the feel of it. "Seems you can't get enough of my body? Glad to see how you acted wasn't all in the moment," she said, as she smiled, as he gently massaged and rubbed her flank. "I can never get tired of your amazing body, especially after I enjoyed it so much," he said with a smile, as he ran a finger on each hand over the cutie mark on both of her cheeks, making the mare shiver a bit, as she looked up at him. "Just so you know, touching a mare's cutie mark is a very intimate thing, sweetie," she said, as he frowned and looked at her. "Well, can I keep touching yours?" he asked while she rolled her eyes and smirked up at him. "After everything we did, it'd be weird if I didn't allow you," she said before she leaned up and gave him a quick and soft peck on the lips. "But as much as I would love to stay here and enjoy being on top of you, I think we both need to clean up," she said, as she was sticky with sweat while he was sticky because of her spray. "Yeah, though first we need to, well, separate," he said with a blush, as Mare could still feel him inside her. His length had shrunk, but she found herself still plugged up. "Seeing as I don't want to leave a trail of it on my floor, could you be a sweetie and carry me there?" she asked, as he chuckled and kissed the top of her head. "Sure thing, wouldn't want to make more of a mess of your office," he said, as he stood up, using his tails to keep her up against him, and made his way towards the bathroom that was connected to her office. He was careful not to let himself pull out of her as he made his way to the bathroom, but he was having a bit of trouble considering how with each step she squeezed him slightly. A part of him really wanted to pump a bit, but he knew the mayor was done for now, making this quite tortuous to him. "Are you really getting turned on again?" Mayor asked, as she looked up at him, already feeling him harden up a bit inside her. "Sorry, it's just I'm still in you, and you are squeezing me with every step," he said with a sheepish grin before she smiled up at him. "You are such a pervy fox, aren't you?" she teased while chuckled and smirked down at her. "For beautiful Mares like you?" "Yes," he said before they entered the bathroom, and he carefully stepped into the rather large bath she had in it. They both let out a shiver as he pulled out of her, his member going back into him, while they both watched his seed pour out of her and into the tub. Mayo was shocked to see how much seed was actually pouring out of her, which she quickly remembered how all of this was sealed up in her for hours. "I really need to go see Nurse Redheart if I am with full now," Mayor thought with a smile, as she was actually excited about the prospect of it. Naruto though couldn't help but found himself a bit turned on, as he watched it pour out of her while she splashed some water in between her hind legs to help wash it down. "Not so fast, mister." Down, she teased with a splash of water. "Sorry, I just didn't expect watching that to be so well hot," he said, as she rolled her eyes with a smile. "If you are going to take a bath with me to wash off, none of that. My body is still really tired from what you gave me," she teased before he held his hand up. "I promise I will try my best not to get turned on by you. It'll be hard, but I won't tire you out with another rut," he said, as she nodded before she started to fill up the tub with warm water. The bath was incredibly relaxing for the both of them after their escapades. Naruto helped Mayor wash off, and even just relaxed together in hot water, resting with her back against his chest. Sadly though, as much as the mayor would have loved it, they had to get out. "I'm sorry that I have to go, Mayor," he said, as he watched her put back on her collar and necktie while she made her way back behind her desk. "It's alright, sweetie, as I do have a town to run, and you probably need to return home yourself. Though I will definitely see you again," she said with a kind smile before he nodded and walked over to behind the desk. "Of course you'll see me again," he said, as he gave her one last kiss, and Mayor watched with a smile as he left her office. "Good to see you are awake now," the mayor's secretary said, as she walked into the room a minute or so after Naruto had left. "I came in to check on you earlier because of the sounds I heard, and found the two of you passed out," she said while the mayor at least had the decency to blush a bit. "Was it really that good for you to make all those sounds?" she asked before the mayor let out a dreamy sigh before she rested her head on her hooves. "All that, and more. Here I'm starving after all of that, so why don't we get some food, and I'll tell you everything," the mayor said, as her secretary blushed softly, but nodded, and followed, as she was very curious about her boss's time with the most unique citizen of Ponyville. Naruto was rather deep in thought, as he walked down the basically empty street, as it was getting rather late out. His mind was busy thinking about his amazing time he just shared with the mare, and everything she told him about how intimacy worked with ponies, as well as what Celestia had figured out about his new body thanks to Fluttershy. Right now, he just wanted to get a chance to talk with Cup about what had happened when he lost control that first time. He fully planned to throw himself at her mercy and apologize for what he did. He didn't feel too afraid of the outcome given she hadn't reported him yet, but still he wanted to apologize while he hoped she didn't hate him or wasn't afraid of him. Though, as he entered Sugar Cube Corner, he figured, as everything was turned off, he'd have to wait for his chance to talk with her tomorrow. That was until he made his way down to his room to find the mare on his mind sitting on his bed. She thought it was quick to get off it, as she noticed he entered the room. "Oh good, you're home? I've been wanting to talk to you," Ms. Cake said with a soft blush on her cheeks before Naruto frowned and walked a bit into his room. "First things first, I want to apologize. I never meant to force myself on you. I am new to being around ponies, and I know this doesn't excuse me at all, but I just wanted to. You don't have to apologize," Ms. Cake said, as she silenced him by gently putting her hoof to his snout. "Naruto, please just sit next to me for a second, and let me say something first," Ms. Cake said, as she sat back down on his bed before patting the area next to her, which he slowly sat down at, a bit unsure how things were about to go. "I'm not mad at you, Naruto, for what happened in the kitchen between the two of us. Surprised, very much so, but if I'm being fully honest, I didn't hate it, and I enjoyed it a lot actually," Ms. Cake said with a very dark blush on her face while Naruto looked at her very surprised. "In fact, it probably was so much more powerful since I haven't been intimate with some pony in a very long time," she added, as that made him more confused than anything. "Wait, seriously? You haven't been intimate with someone? How could you not?" given, he said, his eyes trailing to her rear before he stopped his train of thought due to not wanting to seem like a pervert, although Ms. Cake couldn't help but smile at it. "Why thank you. Something like that really means a lot to a mare like me. It's just that when a mare reaches my age we aren't really viewed as possible mates. Hence why your words and actions really meant more than you know to me," she explained, still blushing, as she looked at him. "You made me feel like an attractive young mare again," she added with a giggle. "Still, I'm sorry I forced myself on you like that," he said, still feeling like he needed to tell her that. "It is quite okay, as I found it rather exciting. Plus I felt, even in that state you were in, you wouldn't hurt me," she said, putting her hoof over his hand with a smile. "Now look, there will have to be some rules if we are to fool around, mister," she said, looking at him with a playful serious look in her eyes. "That means not doing anything while we have customers or when Pinky is around. Last thing I want is for others to catch us in the act," she said, a dark blush on her cheeks to show it wasn't out of being ashamed, but more out of being utterly embarrassed, which he found made her look even cuter. "I promise I'll do my very best to keep my hands off you during business hours, although at times it will be hard," he said, chuckling a bit, as he ran a finger over the ass, making her shiver, and nod shakily, as he ran his finger over her cutie mark. "Then how about one of those kisses you gave me to, seal the deal," she said nervously before Naruto smiled, and tilted her head up so she was looking at him. "How about we seal the deal the real way?" he asked, as she blushed before nodding shyly before she let out a squeal, as he pounced on her. Life for Naruto was odd in Ponyville, but, as things started to change, and shape differently in his new life, he honestly liked it. It was welcomed, especially if it meant he got closer to beautiful Mares. Naruto, as he helped out around Sugar Cube Corner, was thankful for the recent turn of events that happened to him. Without his lust worrying him 24/7, he was actually able to settle, and even more so in Ponyville. For the last week he had been rather active with both Mare and Cup, but in return he didn't have to fear jumping on the ponies around town. Plus he got to enjoy both of them regularly, so all in all things were going good. "Naruto dear, not that I mind, but shouldn't we wait until we close up?" Cup said, holding in a soft moan, as Naruto's hands groped her flank while his clones were working around her. "Oh sorry," Naruto said, as he realized what he was doing, his hands still on her plump flank while chuckling a bit. "Guess I was a bit caught up thinking how much fun I've had with you recently," he added, making the mare blush and roll her eyes at him with a smirk. "Well, you know the rules. Hands off until after work at least," she warned with a smirk before he quickly took his hands off it, already missing it under his hands. "Sorry, it's harder not to touch than I thought. You don't know how amazing your flank is," and feel what Naruto told her, chuckling at the slight glare while the blush on her cheeks betrayed her. "Don't you have to go somewhere like Fluttershy's soon?" "It's almost time," Ms. Cake said, a bit embarrassed at getting flustered by him so easily like that. "Your clones will be more than able to help me. Wouldn't want to keep her waiting now, would you?" she added, as Naruto looked up at the clock and frowned a bit. "Oh dang, I didn't realize it was this late." "Thanks for reminding me," Naruto said, as he hurried towards the door before pausing and turning back to her with a smile. "Though I'll do my best not to stay out too late. I wouldn't want to leave another lady waiting tonight," he teased, his smile growing as her blush increased before he ran out. Ms. Cake could only grumble, as he ran off before turning to glare at the clones that chuckled behind her. Keep working you two or your boss isn't getting anything tonight, she warned with a playful glare, liking the control and power she felt a bit. As they nodded and got to work, Naruto smiled as he made his way through town and towards Fluttershy's cottage. Truthfully, ever since gaining help with his animalistic urges, he was able to enjoy the company of other Maras such as Fluttershy, Rarity, Applejack, and even Rainbow Dash. It let him enjoy his time in Ponyville more without the constant fear that normally hung over his head. Fluttershy, are you there? Naruto asked, as he knocked on her cottage's door. Sorry I was a little late. Got caught up at Sugar Cube Corner for a bit, he said through the door before it opened, and the soft yellow Pegasus smiled at him. Don't worry, Naruto. I lost track of time myself a bit, as I had to help a new animal friend that got hurt, Fluttershy said, making Naruto sigh in relief a bit for not actually making her wait. It always made him feel a bit bad to make her wait, given she continuously went out of her way to set time aside and help him or just spend time with him. Oh, I was thinking we would take a little trip to a nearby clearing, as today's weather is perfect for a picnic. I even packed some fish dishes for you, Fluttershy said, as fish wasn't an abnormal thing to eat since some animals ate them, and even Pegasi, other than her, ate them occasionally. A picnic actually sounds great, and the promise of your cooking is definitely an added bonus, Naruto said with a smile, as Fluttershy's way of making fish seriously made him drool. He wasn't sure if it was because of his new body, but fish was seriously something he craved from time to time. Fluttershy could only smile and blush a bit as she walked out and closed the door behind her. Angel, sitting on her back with her various animal friends, followed behind her. Well, we should start heading over there before the food gets too cold. She stuttered out a bit before Naruto nodded and followed beside her. So how have you been, Naruto? I heard you went to see Mayor. Is everything okay? Fluttershy asked with a worried look in her eyes as she looked up at him. Oh, it was nothing. I was just checking in with her to see if I got any new job requests and ask her a few things about Ponyville and how things work here. It's still a bit odd living in a town full of ponies after all, he said, covering up the real reason for his visit with something believable, as honestly he was still adjusting to it all. Well, if you ever need help or have questions, please always feel welcome to come to me, Naruto, Fluttershy said with a serious look in her eyes as she stared up at him before he nodded and put his hand on top of her head. Thanks, Fluttershy, that means a lot, he said, as he started to softly pet the top of her head, quickly making the Pegasus blush darkly and let out a squeak. We should continue on. We are almost there, Fluttershy stutters out before shakily walking forward, making Naruto chuckle and follow behind her. Once they arrived, Naruto couldn't help but let out an impressive whistle at the sight. The clearing was rather large with flowers scattered around it and a river running through it. So how did you find this place? Naruto asked, as Fluttershy took off her saddlebag and gently pulled out a blanket for them to sit on. A bird friend of mine told me about it, and I checked it out once before, figuring it'd be a nice place to have a picnic. I kind of planned this for the last couple of days. I'm happy you were able to come along, she said softly, a blush covering her cheeks as she smiled while he helped unpack the food from her bag. Well, thank you for inviting me, as this place is amazing, Naruto said with a smile, as he put the picnic basket in front of him before sitting down on the blanket upright, watching as some of the birds Fluttershy cared for flew above them in the sky. Fluttershy blushed a bit as she sat down on the blanket beside Naruto, wanting to summon the little courage she had in her to sit closer, but the mere thought of it was making her face heat up. Angel, though, as he watched his caretaker blush and squirm beside the fox, could only sigh, as he was tired of this. Too many times did he have to hear her talk to him about the fox only to squeal in embarrassment and say how it never could happen or how she couldn't believe she was thinking things like that. It got to the point it interfered with when she was supposed to give him his carrots. Today, Angel was determined to make this stop. He knew from the way the fox looked at his caretaker that he was interested, so all he felt he had to do was give his caretaker a little shove, and the dominoes would fall. Angel rolled his eyes before sitting next to Fluttershy and, not even trying to hide his intentions, pushed her so she fell sideways against the fox. Angel, what was that for? Fluttershy asked, blushing, as she tried to sit herself back up only for Angel to attempt to use all of his force to keep her down. But being that he was a small rabbit, he wasn't able to. Maybe he's worried about you getting chilly or something? Either way, you can sit closer, Naruto said while Fluttershy could only blush and look at him before nervously scooching closer to him before the blush increased once a few of his tails draped over her. Angel smirked a bit at the scene, but knew it would require more to get the two of them together, and quickly hopped over to the nearby bear and started to chatter in his ear. The bear smiled and nodded along, also wanting to get their sweet caretaker together with the one she cared for, before Angel hopped off. The bear acted as best as it could. It was excited to run around the clearing, eyes straight ahead, as if it saw something interesting on the other side of the clearing, before barreling past Fluttershy. He of course made sure not to trample her or even hurt her, just bump into her enough to send her falling over and onto the fox's lap before diving into the bushes to secretly watch the results. Fluttershy was caught completely off guard, having been busy daydreaming a bit, as embarrassing as it was to admit. As her bear friend knocked her over, she could only blush, as she now found herself held in Naruto's arm with her sitting in his lap. "You okay, Fluttershy?" he asked, as he looked down at her, his hands gently holding her over her pulled-in wings before Fluttershy looked up at him. "Yeah, it seems like my bear friend wasn't looking where he was going much," Fluttershy said, as she enjoyed sitting on his lap with a blush on her cheeks. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.